Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local.
And so for our final installment or segment today, we'll be hiring Chris Wallace, who's now going to be out of a job for our. No, I'm kidding. Anyway,
Scott Galloway as well.
Is he a CNN Plus guy? Well, I think they're going to bring some of those folks into the main shows. But anyway, enough with that. So, David, you were interested in talking about some of the findings of a recent Breeden study about small business software buyers' content preferences. And what did that say?
Yeah, so Breeden's done, and so this is where the segue sort of plays in. So Breeden's done a lot of these types of surveys of small businesses who are buying from various SaaS companies, and there's been an overwhelming preference, as we've talked about in previous Near Memos, overwhelming preference for sort of self-research, self-discovery, not the sort of outbound sales model. It's much more particular for smaller and medium-sized companies. They don't want to rely on a salesperson. They want to do their own research. So this most recent survey from Breeden was asking, okay, well, if you do want to do your own research, what are the content types that are most likely to catch your eye or induce you to buy? I forget exactly how they phrased it. And they did some interesting sort of cohort analysis segmentation of the survey. They looked at how professional services folks reacted to a various set of content types versus manufacturing versus retail. And then they also broke it down by the generation of the respondent. So Gen Z, millennial, boomer, et cetera. And, there were some sort of outlier responses. For example, the one that struck me, 43% of Gen Z or millennials was most likely to use a Facebook post as their preferred content format that they came across something from a software vendor. Compare that to only 10% of boomers. So, that's a substantial difference. But by and large, the types of content that they were asking about, Facebook posts, podcasts, checklists or worksheets, tweets, email newsletter, to me, there was not a huge, there was sort of the same level, a very similar level of interest in coming across content in many of these different types of formats. And so to me, it speaks more to the difficulty of content marketing these days, that even if you have a very specific, target buyer of an older millennial at a manufacturing company, you kind of still need to have a pretty holistic content strategy, because you don't know what's actually going to be most likely to catch their attention. So, and this is where I think the segue hits. If there's a way for
machines,
artificial intelligence, machines to help me scale out a blog post into all of these different formats, or scale up a social post on Facebook into a longer form piece that that a boomer in manufacturing is expecting to see, then that might be a huge benefit for marketers, even if the goal is not necessarily to rank better in Google or to spam the world with all this content, but just to help me reach my consumers in the format that they prefer the most. Because I think that to me was the biggest takeaway, is that there isn't one sort of dominant format that everyone is hoping to come across your content.
As somebody who was a content marketer in my previous job, it's just really challenging to deal with all the funnel stages and the personas and the different channels. It's kind of an overwhelming thing. It's not humanly possible, which brings in the idea of some sort of AI aided approach. And I suspect that's what we'll see. We will see what you envision happen to some degree, and for scale. Content is expensive. Content teams aren't getting larger, but the expectations are. So I suspect you're right.
I was just wondering if maybe it's the problem with the expectations, that you should have personas and multimedia, and maybe the expectation is wrong.
The expectations are kind of crazy, but this is what they are, right? This is what
I'm just saying.
Well,
they're full of shit,
this is what CMOs and market, C-suite folks expect, is there's a kind of a conventional wisdom here about, you got to have content and it's got to cover all these bases. And if you combine, so I'll just, not to disparage my former employer, Uberall, because I like them very much and I like all the people there. But we had multiple languages and countries. We had funnel stages. We had, ideal buyer profiles, and we had verticals to some degree, and it just, it was like 5 people or 4 or 5 people. So it was just impossible. There was a kind of an inherent impossibility about trying to generate content to meet all of these categories and needs. And I think that a lot of companies are in that same boat. I mean, if you're in a single market and a single vertical, US, and you're doing plumbing or whatever it is, or HR software or something, it's much easier for you. So.
Yeah, but even in the verticals, I mean, that's what I thought that maybe the most interesting piece of this was the age-based, generational differences. So even in HR software, you probably have millennials who are sort of moving into the leadership roles, and you still have silent generation folks, and they have very different preferences on
probably
where
not
they want
silent
to be
generation. Those people are probably not in the workforce at this point.
You never know.
Yes, I guess that's true.
Being what it is, the Social Security tax are not worth what they used to be. So,
but okay, I think we've come to the end of another exciting episode 61, and we're recording this on Earth Day, so take shorter showers, use less energy, buy fewer things, don't use single-use plastics, all of that kind of stuff. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.